Good morning, everybody. Today, in our CSSR webinar series, we have Dr. Tomáš Hoch to discuss the Nagorno Karabakh issue with us. He studied political and cultural geography at the Department of Human Geography and Regional Development, University of Ostrava, Czechia, where he's currently working as an assistant professor. His research focuses on nationalism, separatism, conflict transformation, state building, and nation building process in the post-Soviet area. His recent publications include articles in Europe-Asia Studies, Iran and the Caucasus, and the problems of post-communism. He is the co-author of the monograph De facto States in Eurasia with Vincent Kopeček, Routledge, 2020. So, Thomas, thank you very much for being here with us. And without further delay, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Yanis, for invitation. Thank you also for introduction. And I would like to welcome all the participants here on this workshop that we have today. As Yanis have said, I have studied political and cultural geography, so this is my approach to the conflict. I will right now try to squeeze the presentation. Yes, so I hope that you all can hear me and see me. So today I would like to discuss the issue of Nagorno Karabakh conflict, the history and the current situation. The conflict in Nagorno Karabakh, or Artsakh, how Armenians usually describe it, is the most complex of all conflicts on the Caucasus. That, especially when I started to focus on conflicts in the Caucasus, that used to be some 20 years ago when I finished my master's. Then I went to South Africa. I was working as a humanitarian aid worker in South Africa, Namibia, and Mozambique, and then I returned back to Czechia to study PhD, and I focused on humanitarian aid issues in Abkhazia. So that's why I have been traveling quite often to the conflict areas in the Caucasus. But honestly, I have to say that the conflict in Nagorno Karabakh is the worst of all the conflicts here, not only because of the death loss. Around 30,000 people lost their lives. There is more than 1 million of refugees, and there is still the hostilities that right now we are actors of and can see the conflict right now going on. So my presentation is about introduction to the formation of de facto states in the post-Soviet area, because I think it's necessary to have some conceptualization and to look on the theory. I don't want to bother with the theory too much, but Nagorno-Karabakh conflict is not the only conflict on the Caucasus, so I would like to set it into the frame of post-Soviet area conflicts. Then I would like in Nagorno-Karabakh as elsewhere on the Caucasus, the conflict is having old roots, and I would say it's since the end of the Tsarist era. And when I was in Armenia and Azerbaijan for a first time, that was in 2005 or 2006, I was surprised always how history matters, because when we started to speak all the topics, usually it started, no, što vám nádo znať, je to naša historia. And then we return back to the history and long centuries ago. So the history really matters. Then I would like to focus on the last days of the Soviet Union and the escalation of the conflict since 1988, because I claim that the current conflict is the continuation of the conflict that we had at the end of the Soviet Union. And then I would like to focus on the current situation on the ground. So, I mean, the past 3 weeks. And then it will be place for questions and answers. Honestly, I have to say that usually when I speak about the conflict in South Ossetia, in Transnistria, or in Abkhazia, it is sensitive. But when I speak about the conflict, or anybody who is speaking about the conflict in Nagorno Karabakh, it is even more sensitive, because always there are two sides of the conflict, and Armenians and Azerbaijanis are often claiming totally different part of the story than the other people are claiming. So it is very sensitive, and I'm sure that even in this audience, it's gonna be a sensitive topic, as all conflicts usually are. As I said, I am a political geographer, so political geographers likes maps, and usually I start my presentation with the map. So here is the map of post-Soviet de facto states. If you look on the map, you realize that Nagorno-Karabakh Republic, or Artsakh Republic, which is official name of this republic since 2017 referendum, is not the only de facto state or unrecognized state in this territory. The other two are Abkhazia and South Ossetia, the Georgian separatist region. Then it is Transnistria, the tiny strip of land on the left bank on Dniester River, Pridnestrovye in Russian. Then we used to have two de facto states that disappeared. It used to be Chechnya after the first Chechen war and disappeared after the second Chechen war when Russians conquered it. And then Gagauzia that peacefully settled up as the autonomy region of Moldova. Then we can talk about Donetsk People's Republic and Luhansk People's Republic, two new emerging de facto states or borderline cases. But de facto states are not only in this region, the post-Soviet region. We can find them everywhere else on the map. If we speak about Africa, there is Somaliland. Previously, it used to be Biafra or Katanga or Anjouan. If we speak about Asia, it used to be East Timor, it used to be Tamil Elam. If we speak about Caribbean, it used to be Bougainville. In Europe, Republika Srpska, Republika Serbia, and Krajina. So a lot of de facto states. So I would say they are not just the anomalies on the world map, these unrecognized entities. And sometimes in academic literature, you can find the term that they are anomaly of the international system because they are not internationally recognized. They want to be independent, but almost nobody is recognizing them. But I would say that they don't constitute a temporary anomaly, but they are rather a permanent part of the international system, because currently we are not focusing on empirical capability of statehood, but there used to be a shift into juridical statehood. So they are not temporary, they are permanent part of the world map. And sooner or later, new de facto states will emerge on the world map. So it is important phenomenon that deserves our attention and our scrutiny on that one. And one more thing that usually in academic literature, you can find that these separatist regions, these de facto states, are puppets of their masters that are the patron states. So in the case of Transnistria, Abkhazia, and South Ossetia, some authors are describing that they are vassals of Russia. In the case of Nagorno Karabakh Republic, that they are vassal of Armenia. I don't like this optics, because I claim that it is a complex interplay between patron and a client, the whole patron-client relationship. And if we look on Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, who is influencing whom, we can speak about two former presidents of Armenia, Robert Kocharyan and Serge Sargsyan. Both of them used to be from Nagorno-Karabakh. And one more thing, when we are looking on the map, that it is not the first time that these de facto states or unrecognized states appears on this map. We used to have similar entities after the end of the Tsarist regime, when a lot of new states and these borderline cases appeared. So it is the second wave of political and territorial reconstruction of the whole area. So that is just on the beginning. If we look on the territory and the population, usually these areas are not very big. The biggest is the Chechen, or used to be the Chechen Republic of Ichkeria, currently Chechnya is the part of the Russian Federation. So currently the biggest one is Nagorno Karabakh Republic, but this area is together with the territory that Azerbaijani describe as occupied territory and Armenians describe it as liberated territory. So it is not only the territory of the former Nagorno-Karabakh Autonomous Oblast, which used to be 3 times smaller, but it is also with this occupied or liberated land. It depends who is speaking about them. The population of Nagorno-Karabakh Republic used to be 150,000 people, according to the last census in 2016. But currently, because of the humanitarian catastrophe, more than 70,000 people left Karabakh. So currently the population is definitely much smaller than it used to be. The capital is Stepanakert. That's the Armenian name of the capital. The Azerbaijani name of the capital of Nagorno-Karabakh Autonomous Oblast used to be Khankendi. Usually, when I study the conflict, I'm asking many questions. Some of them look that they are pretty simple to answer, but in the case of Nagorno-Karabakh, it is not simple at all, because who's to blame for the conflict? Which factors contributed to its escalation? What kind of conflict actually it is? And what would be the possible options for a peaceful solution? All of them are very complex, and all of them different who is speaking. So that's the answers are totally different. I would start with the Armenian perspective. Armenians are generally saying that the conflict is not perceived as religious, because sometimes you can see often in the Western literature that it is a religious conflict between Muslims and Christians. As Samuel Huntington wrote in 90s, the clash of civilizations. So the conflict is perceived as religious. Armenians are saying that it is definitely not a religious conflict. Armenians are saying that it is not a territorial dispute between Armenia and Azerbaijan. It doesn't matter if there are Armenians from Armenia or Armenians from the Nagorno-Karabakh Republic. What they are saying that Karabakh is a part of historical Armenia that wrongly was handed over to the administration of Azerbaijan in 1923. The experience of living together with Azerbaijanis is very bitter. There used to be violent clashes in 1905, the skirmishes, the Armenian-Tatar War, then the genocide in 1915 that once again Armenians are calling it genocide, especially in Turkey and also in Azerbaijan. People don't call it genocide, but it used to be the events during the First World War when both sides were in war. Then it used to be another Armenian-Azerbaijani war or Armenian-Tatar war when these countries became independent in 1918. So in 1920 and 1920, it used to be another war. Then it used to be another war at the end of the Soviet Union when it dissoluted. It lasted until 1994. And since that time, it is sometimes called frozen peace or frozen conflict, but definitely it's not frost, the conflict, because it's having its own dynamics. And every few years we can see new escalation of hostilities. There is still the skirmishes on the borders, so definitely it is not frozen. So from the Armenian perspective, it is national liberation struggle, which goal is to return back the historical Karabakh to Armenia, because from their position, it is the Armenian land. And then I would say that during the past 20 years, there is on Armenian side huge demonstrations and of bad conditions that happened in Karabakh and in Ottoman Empire previously in 1915. So they are connecting these two things and saying that if they are not defending their territory, that it would be huge massacres or another genocide can occur. So from the Armenian perspective, peace is possible only after recognition of independence of Nagorno-Karabakh. Of course, that this is the perspective that Azerbaijanis totally disagree with. Azerbaijanis are once again saying that it is not a religious conflict. So the main dispute is with Armenia, not with Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh. In general idea in Azerbaijan, the Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh are only one part of the community. The second part are Azerbaijanis who had to flee, who had been cleansed during the war, and they had to left. So when Armenians are saying that it is nation liberation struggle, they are saying that it is only masked territorial claims. Maskirovka is the Russian word. Armenia is an aggressor state. They initiated the conflict in the 80s because they had to change the status quo. They were really disappointed that Nagorno-Karabakh Autonomous Oblast is part of the Azerbaijan. And they continue to occupy not only Nagorno-Karabakh, but also large territory, which is close to Nagorno-Karabakh. Currently, it's 7 districts of Azerbaijan, and it is 14% of Azerbaijani land. So Azerbaijanis are saying that this is occupation of their territory. Also, Russians are guilty because they relocated the Armenians during the 19th century to the Karabakh areas, favoring them during the Soviet Union. So also in Azerbaijan, there are strong voices to blame Russians for the conflict. So Azerbaijan is only trying to defend its territorial integrity, its sovereignty according to international standard, and peace is possible only after returning back Nagorno-Karabakh to Azerbaijan. That's two completely different point of views, of course. But if you look on supposedly objective facts of anthropology, history, or archaeology, I would say that even this historiography function as an important weapon of ethnic nationalism. Viktor Schnirelman very nicely described these attitudes of ethnogenesis, who was here the first in his book 20 years ago. So I gave here just 2 quotations. First is Armenian, that Karabakh formed part of the kingdom of Armenia, at least from 2nd century before Christ. Its population has been a continuous part of the Armenian cultural space for more than 2,000 years. It's a homeland symbolizing Armenian unity and consolidation. From the second side, during the course of past 1,600 years, the lowland and upland of Kura and Aras River, including Karabakh and Nakhichevan provinces, were component parts of state structures within the territory of Azerbaijan. And then also that Karabakh Armenians are not ethnic Armenians, but Armenians, Albanians, because previously you had Caucasian Albania or Alban, and the population who used to live there lived also in the areas of present-day Nagorno-Karabakh. So that's another option. Why Karabakh is so important? Sometimes you are reading about very fertile soil and about the woods and these issues. I would say that it is metaphorical. It is not about the soil. It is about the collective memory. It is symbolic meaning. It's like Novgorod or Suzdal for Russians or Orleans for French. So Thomas Deval wrote a very nice book, The Black Garden, which is official, which is in English the translation of Karabakh, because Kara is black in Turkish and Bach is in Persian garden. So the Black Garden, and Nagorno or Nagorny, mountainous in Russian. And Tomáš Deval said that for Armenians, Karabakh is the last outpost of their Christian civilization, historic haven of Armenian princes before the Eastern Turkic world begins. Azerbaijanis talk about its cradle, nursery, birthplace of musicians and poets, especially in Shusha. And historically, Armenia is diminished without this enclave, monasteries, and geographically and economically. And Azerbaijan is not viable without Nagorno-Karabakh. And then 2 years later, he's saying another very truth thing that Karabakh was, in short, a culturally rich border zone like Alsace, Flanders, and Kashmir, and like them, fated to be a battlefield. Usually when you look on Armenian and Azerbaijani sources, sometimes even on the journalistic sources of the Western provenience, you can read that it is age-old ethnic hatreds between Armenians and Azerbaijanis. However, the historians are saying that there is little historical evidence of the clashes between Armenians and Azerbaijanis or Tatars, how you describe them, during the 15th, 16th, and 17th century. Ronald Gregor Suni is very nicely describing these things. And I claim that the contemporary conflict that we are having in 2020 is the continuation of the conflict that started in 1988. And it was a byproduct of Soviet national policy, and it was enabled by the policy of glasnost. And factors of this mobilization, of ethno-political mobilization, not only of Armenians, but also of Azerbaijanis, is the perception of historical injustices that occurred during the late Tsarist period on the beginning of the 20th century. Then the huge Armenian dissatisfaction with the status of Nagorno Karabakh inside of the Azerbaijan as the autonomous oblast. And then the huge legal and social chaos that's brought by the disintegration of the Soviet Union and weakness of the newly emerging Armenia and Azerbaijan. I don't want to bother you the long time with the history, but here the history matters, and I think it is important just very briefly to go back to the beginning of the 20th century. I would start with the Russian conquest of Karabakh. That's in 1820s, and they started to settle Armenian population in this area, because at that time it used to be time of Khanates, Yerevan Khanate and Yelizavetpol province later on, and the population used to be mixed. Not only in Karabakh, historical Karabakh, but also in Yerevan, that it used to be more Muslims on the beginning of the 19th century than Christians in Yerevan. And during the Russian administration, more and more Armenians were coming from the Ottoman Empire, because Russians asked them to come, and not only for Ottoman Empire, but also from Persia. Then during the industrialization of Baku, because Baku used to be very wealthy oil province, and at the end of the 19th century, its production was over 50% of the world production of oil. So it was really rich province, and it used to be Armenian dominance in the economic and social life, which of course Azerbaijanis were very unhappy about it. Armenians are claiming it many times that Armяне построили Baku, that heard it many times. But when you look on the old quarter, the Icheri Shehir, you know that it's completely a different story. Then it used to be Armenian pogroms in the Ottoman Empire in 1895 and 1896. Then very violent clashes in 1905. Some authors called it the first Armenian-Tatar War. And during these clashes, they occurred in Baku, then later on in Shusha, then in Tiflis, which is Tbilisi currently, then in Yelizavetpol, which is Ganja. And these skirmishes and these violent conflicts caused death of roughly 7,000 to 8,000 dead people, and a lot of villages were looted. Shvetochovsky or Kazemzadeh are writing about almost 300 destroyed villages. They are saying that it used to be a little bit more Azerbaijani villages that used to be looted, around 160, and around 140 or 130 used to be the Armenian villages. Then it used to be events of the First World War that Armenians are describing as genocide. Azerbaijanis are refusing this concept of the genocide. That once again, this changed the ethnic structure of Armenia and Karabakh, because a lot of Armenians were coming after these violent things. I would say that before the genocide, the Yerevan used to be very multi-ethnic in its composition, and around 40% of population used to be Muslims, not only Azerbaijanis or Tatar population, but also Kurds and a lot of other small nationalities, Lesbians and Talish also. Then came another war in 1919 and 1920. It ended up the Soviet occupation of both Azerbaijan and Armenia. Azerbaijan in April 1920 and Armenia in November and December 1920. And then Caucasian Bureau of the Communistic Party decided that Karabakh will remain within the borders of the Azerbaijan. So for the first time in 1923, we are having Nagorno Karabakh, because during the 19th century, even if there used to be the censuses, the Russian censuses, we had no area called Nagorno Karabakh. We had only area of historical Karabakh. It means the upland part and then the lowland part as well. So the Nagorno Karabakh appeared in 1923. 94% of population used to be Armenians at that time. Explanation, because for Armenians this is a huge tragedy, and always they are returning back to this issue that during the Soviet Union they decided to give Nagorno Karabakh to Azerbaijan. I would say that it was continuation of the decision that already in Tsarist era the government, Russian government made. Also the British forces deployed in the Transcaucasus during the Russian Civil War were talking with Azerbaijanis and were thinking about Karabakh as the part of Azerbaijan, mostly because of transport and geography, because access towards the Karabakh during the 19th century and the beginning of 20th century, if you wanted to go from Yerevan to Khankendi or Stepanakert, or how you call this entity, you had to go to Tbilisi, then you had to go to Ganja, and then you went to Karabakh. The access were from the Azerbaijani plants and then from the south of Karabakh, not from Zangezur, because Zangezur is very mountainous and there was no road to connect Yerevan and Shusha. So the geography matters here, and also the geopolitical interests, because for Soviets it used to be very important to have good relations with Kemalistic Turkey. So that was another issue. Armenians are often cited the letter of Anastas Mikoyan to Lenin in May 1919, when they have said that Dashnaks are trying to attach Karabakh to Armenia, but for a population of Karabakh, that would mean losing their source of life in Baku and linking up with Yerevan, with which they were never and in no way linked together. Anastas Mikoyan used to be a very influential Soviet politician of Armenian nationalists, and later on the member of Politburo, the close cooperator with Stalin. Results of this period, why I'm saying that the history matters, because the ethnic violence on the beginning of 20th century claimed the lives of up to 20% of population of Nagorno-Karabakh. 20% of population, that's a lot. Then during the Soviet period, there used to be the Soviet ideology of friendship among nations. So it was a taboo to speak about the violent episodes of the history. But I'm saying that mutual mistrust continued to exist even during the communistic periods, because my experience is that maybe somebody from the audience will say something different, but it used to be a lot of mixed marriages between Ossets and Georgians, and even up to now there is a lot of mixed marriages. During the communistic era, used to be a lot of mixed marriages between Abkhaz and Georgians, but mixed marriages between Azerbaijanis and Armenians, yes, they existed, but I would say that there was only small exception, and that used to be in cosmopolitan Baku. usually Azerbaijani as a man and Armenian as a woman. I would say that in rural areas or in Yerevan, it was pretty uncommon, and mixed marriages were almost not occurring. The first skirmishes, let's say, or opening up the issue of Karabakh appeared in 1965, when it used to be 50 years from the genocide in 1915. And it used to be huge demonstrations in Yerevan for support of recognition of genocide. Then 1 year later, it used to be petition of 2,000 important Armenian public figures who addressed to Moscow a letter, and they asked for transferring of Nagorno-Karabakh to Soviet Armenia. For the first time, it used to be the bottom-up approach that people were asking politicians to change the status quo. And then I would say the biggest problem started during the Gorbachev era, when it started to be the politics of glasnost, which started with the freedom of speech, and both sides were nationalizing strongly, and started to construct the image of ancient enemy. So it is since that time then it started, this conflict, its age-old ethnic hatreds. Azerbaijani author Rauf Garagozov very nicely is describing, after a careful study of historical materials, that both sides created the victim narrative, which he is describing as oversimplified interpretation of historical events, very excessive emotionality, and also their reliance on myth and old grievances. And he calls it schematic narrative template, that the nationalists are using this very simplified version of the history, ethnic lenses. When we come to 1980s, it used to be the economic issues. It started with the economic issues because Nagorno-Karabakh performed better than the rest of the Azerbaijan, but worse than Armenia. So Armenians in Karabakh were saying that it is the incompetency of the local Azerbaijani elite, because in Armenia, in Yerevan, the living standard is higher. Then another clashes had been about the history, because in Nagorno-Karabakh, it used to be the Azerbaijani history taught in the Armenian language, and Armenians were demanding that they would like to learn the history of Armenians, not the Azerbaijanis. Third factor, and I would say very important one, used to be demography. Because Armenian population in Nagorno-Karabakh were over 90% during the 1920s, but then steadily were declining during the 50s and 60s, and especially during the 70s and 80s, the politics of Azerbaijanization and a lot of Azerbaijanis were coming to Karabakh strongly shifted this balance, and the number of Azerbaijanis were rising, while the number of Armenians stayed more or less the same. Armenian authors are writing about Nakhichevan syndrome, that all the ethnically mixed areas, the Zangezur, Nakhichevan, and Nagorno-Karabakh, used to have the mixed population on the beginning of the 20s. But then during the Soviet period, Armenians are saying that, okay, we had more than 1/3 of population in Nakhichevan, but currently we are having there only 1.5% of population because of politics of Azerbaijanization. So, okay, if here a lot of Azerbaijanis are coming, once again, they would like to shift this balance of demographic balance. Then Armenian and Azerbaijani intelligences started to create new national identities without the Soviet ideology, and the Karabakh question was the easiest way to gain popularity for nationalistic groups in both Soviet socialistic republics, in Armenia and in Azerbaijan as well. So it started, the issue of Karabakh started to be associated with the new national identity for Armenians and Azerbaijanis, regaining for Armenians or retaining for Azerbaijanis. So since this period, it started to be the identitary nature of the conflict. Then escalation of the conflict during this period. It started as the war of laws because the Karabakh Soviet were asking to be incorporated into Soviet Armenia. Then the Central Committee of the Communist Party denied this. Then it used to be Supreme Soviet of the Armenian Soviet Socialistic Republic, which were asking for this one. Azerbaijani denied it. So it used to be war of laws. And since 1988, it started the war on the ground because it used to be forced migrations of Armenians and Azerbaijanis. After Sumgait massacre, a lot of Armenians were expelled from Azerbaijan. Almost all Azerbaijanis were expelled from Armenia, and up to now, we are having more than 1 million of refugees from Nagorno-Karabakh. So if we are talking about, for example, Abkhazia, in Abkhazia, we are having 250,000 refugees. In the Karabakh war, we are having more than 1 million of refugees. And up to now, even during this war, we are having more than 50% of population of Karabakh are refugees currently. So it is really devastating effects. And then the Soviet forces withdrew when the Soviet Union dissoluted at the end of 1991, and the war started, full-scale war. It was never officially declared, so there you cannot say if it was November or December 1991 or the January 1992, but still it used to be war with all the consequences. Another factor used to be very hard economic situation during the conflict, because during the dissolution of the Soviet Union, it used to be very bad period economic for the whole post-Soviet space. And in Armenia and Azerbaijan, it used to be even worse because of the conflict. In Armenia, because of the devastated earthquake as well. Inflation in Armenia used to be around 5,000%, and the number of people who were living below the poverty line rose from 20% to 50%. And in Azerbaijan, the situation was not better. It used to be hyperinflation, similar, almost similar as in Armenia. The export dropped to less than 50%. Political instability. You had pre-coup d'etat in Azerbaijan. And since 1994, as I have said, the Armenians won the war, and now currently they are occupying 14% of Armenian land. They called it liberated territories. Ceasefires were signed in Moscow, but usually there are no peacekeepers up to now, which is problematic. Here is the map of Nagorno-Karabakh. You can see here. I don't know if it is visible. Yes. So this is the map of Nagorno-Karabakh Autonomous Oblast, the autonomy that used to exist during the Soviet period. Here is Shaumian district, the district that Armenians are claiming used to be part of the Karabakh, but Azerbaijanis are occupying this part. And then there are 7 districts of Azerbaijan. This is this districts that Armenia is occupying now. Not only the Lachin corridor, very important one, because that's the corridor with whom Nagorno-Karabakh used to be connected to Armenia during the war. Currently, they build the second road via Kelvajar. In Armenian, it's called Karvachar. So here is the road which is going to Sevan, so the northern direction. So that's the map of Nagorno-Karabakh. I'm saying here up to 2020 because currently I'm sure that this map is not valid anymore, because currently there is a huge offensive and Azerbaijanis are regaining new territories, especially on the south of Nagorno Karabakh. So I would say that almost half of this occupied land is currently under the Azerbaijani control. But there is a huge propaganda from both sides. So reading the newspapers in Armenia, you are having feeling that nothing happened and Armenians are still controlling the whole border. If you are reading the Azerbaijani newspapers, then you see that the Armenian defense system is totally in decay, and that the whole Karabakh will be defeated sooner or later. Then in 2007, the Madrid peace principles that are proposals for peaceful solution that OSCE offered, all of them are very difficult on the ground. Just very briefly, I would like to touch it because I'm having the last 15 or 20 minutes, not more, and I would like to come to the present day situation. First of all, it's the phase process, and it should start with the Armenians that would return back the occupied territories around Nagorno-Karabakh. Then it should be the deployment of peacekeeping forces. Then it should be a small corridor which would connect Nagorno-Karabakh with Armenia, and Azerbaijan should agree with the proposed solution about the Nagorno-Karabakh status, which is the referendum. Of course, there are many disputes how the referendum would look like, who could be eligible to vote. Of course, not only people who are living in Nagorno-Karabakh presently, but also the refugees, and many who would be the peacekeepers, Russian soldiers or anybody else. Who would finance it? Very, very difficult, this one on the ground. And then during 2014 and 15 started to be Madrid 2.0, I would say the light version of Madrid, to return back to Azerbaijan only some of the occupied zones on the south and east of Nagorno-Karabakh, and that Azerbaijan should agree with the interim peace status in Nagorno-Karabakh. But it's very difficult trade-offs, this Madrid principles, because Azerbaijan would receive only some of the territories, not all of them. Nagorno-Karabakh would have line of contact closer to Stepanakert and from the plains and lowlands from the south, which would be very difficult for them to defend. Then you would have Russian peacekeepers on the ground that up to now Azerbaijanis and Armenians are against Russian peacekeepers. And then another very important part, that currently in Nagorno-Karabakh there is no concept of cohabitation between Armenians and Azerbaijanis. This is, from my point of view, the worst situation, because, for example, in Abkhazia, when I spoke with members of civil society activists can understand that Georgians could return back to Abkhazia and they could live together. Of course, this is not the mainstream, but they understand that if the conflict should be over, this is the only possibility. In Nagorno-Karabakh, when I spoke with the political elite and civil society leaders, they are against the return of the population, and not only the older people. I have realized that usually the younger people are more radical than the older one, but in the case of Nagorno-Karabakh, even older Armenians are against of return of the population. They can tell you nice stories that they had when they used to live together, and they are having friends. They had friends at that time, but people-to-people contact disappeared completely after the war. So then the situation is not good in this case. So then what happened during the past 10 years, it used to be sniper tactics along the front line. So still every year the people used to die on the line of contact, 300 long borders between Nagorno-Karabakh Republic and Azerbaijan. Since 2014, Azerbaijan started to be very tired that the peace process is leading to nowhere, that Armenia is still having the Nagorno-Karabakh, and situation on the ground is not changing. Then it used to be April War in 2016, the 4-day war. More than 200 people died in this war. And then it used to be big hopes with the new Prime Minister of Armenia, Nikol Pashinyan, because after 20 years, it used to be the first leader of Armenia who was not born in Karabakh, because so-called Karabakh clan used to rule the Armenian politics since 1998, when Robert Kocharyan started to be the president of Armenia. Then later on, Serge Sargsyan, sometimes he's called the last Mohican of the Karabakh War, was the president. And then because of the change of the system, Armenia is not presidential republic, but parliamentary republic. So Nikol Pashinyan became prime minister, and it used to be big hopes in Azerbaijan and the new wave of peace talks. It used to be very positive. The end of 2018 and the beginning of 2019 had a new impetus in peace talk. Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Armenia and Azerbaijan meet together 3 times. Also, President Aliyev met with Pashinyan, and they were discussing these issues to settle out the conflict. And it used to be the quotations that they are preparing the population in Armenia and Azerbaijan for peace. But later on, at the end of summer in 2019, the relations between Pashinyan and Aliyev started to be bad again. I remember I was on a peace workshop in Reichenau in Austria. That was the end of September or the beginning of November beginning of October last year. And I remember the Azerbaijani delegation and Armenian delegation continued in the struggles and fightings as used to be normal during the 2014 and 2015. So this spring completely disappeared, and they were not preparing for the peace anymore. Why? What happened? Why? What was the wrong steps during the past year that happened? Nikol Pashinyan had many proclamations that Karabakh is Armenia. Ilham Aliyev said that Karabakh is Azerbaijan, . And Nikol Pashinyan said Karabakh is Armenia, ! So that's very bad if you want to discuss the peace process. Then Nikol Pashinyan announced new huge infrastructure programs on the occupied territories, including the new road connecting Syunik with the southern Nagorno Karabakh Republic, so Hadrut and Kapan. So this is on the occupied territories. This is something similar what Israel is doing on the West Bank. So this is completely unacceptable for Azerbaijanis. Then Nikol Pashinyan attended new presidential inauguration of Araik Haratunyans in the city of Shusha, which is once again very sensitive, because normally the inaugurations used to be in Stepanakert, because Shusha, that is the symbolic meaning, the capital of Shusha Khanate, capital city of the former Nagorno Karabakh intellectual and Gysian. And then later on, he applauded to his speech of no chance for the land swaps. So once again, this is very problematic, because during 2008 and 2009, still it used to be the possibility to return back the territories, because 70% of population in Armenia were willing to return back the territories if there is a big progress in the peace process. After 2018, only less than 10% of Armenians would be willing to return back any territory. And if the president of Nagorno-Karabakh Republic is saying that there is no place to return any territory, and the president of a prime minister of Armenia is applauding, so then it's sending very bad signal to the Azerbaijani side. Then Armenia made the Sevres Treaty important part of the country's foreign policy, which is unofficial declaration of war to Turkey, because in Sevres Treaty after the First World War, There used to be the provinces of Kars, Ardahan, and Artvin that on the maps should be Armenian. So Armenians should enlarge its territory, though it is only the mental construction. Still, it is very sensitive issue and not very wise issue to speak and to use as the foreign policy goals. And Ilham Aliyev declared the founding of the Republic of Western Azerbaijan in exile, then accused Armenians with collaboration with Nazi Germany during the course of World War II. Then later on, he criticized the peace process and said that there is a validity of the Azerbaijan's right to use the force. So all these issues are very damaging for any prospects for a peaceful solution. Why the war occurred? Because Azerbaijan is really not happy with the status quo. Peace talks are not leading anywhere. That even in the case of South Ossetia, Transnistria, or Abkhazia, the peace talks are not leading anywhere, but still you can see even the small progress like people-to-people contact, and something can be apolitical like the healthcare or the cooperation on the environmental projects and so on. Nothing like that happened on the line of contact between Armenia and Azerbaijan. There used to be huge demonstrations in Baku on 16th of July 2020 when people were demonstrating for the war because peace process is leading to nowhere. Then there is coronavirus pandemic, which used to affect hardly not only Armenia, but also Azerbaijan, and the economy is having problems. It's not something special here. You can see in Europe as well the situation which hardly affected the region. Then really small public support to return the occupied territories. I have been talking about it. Then more tangible support from Turkey. They had during the summer joint military exercises with Azerbaijani army in Nakhichevan. So all of these factors made nationalistic sentiments pretty strong. And then why this war is different than the wars that used to be before. Right now, this is sensitive because, as I have said, there is a huge propaganda. And if you are reading Armenian sources and Azerbaijani sources, you are having the feeling that you are talking about two completely different things. So, but first of all, there used to be shelling of Stepanakert with the rockets. Stepanakert is in ruins. That used to be for the first time after the war in the 1990s. There used to be shooting on the borders. It used to be small-scale skirmishes for the war in 2016, but this one is really much harder. The Azerbaijani side are using cluster munition, which is against the rules. Armenians are bombing civil targets in Azerbaijan, in the city of Ganja or Terter. There is massive involvement of Turkey, and also there is different tactics that used to be with the drones, because Armenians are struggling with the drones really badly. They are having good system against planes, but these drones are very bad. And then there is horrific death toll, because still you can read about the Armenian victims, because Azerbaijani side is not saying the people who died in the conflict. I mean the soldiers. They are mentioning the civilians, but not the soldier. So you can just guess the amount of people who died in the conflict, but it is reasonable to assume that roughly 1,500 people have been killed. That's the numbers that Laurence Brers and Tom Deval usually are describing in the last 2 days. That's 5% of the people who died in the 6-year conflict in 1988 till 1994, just in 3 weeks. So the situation is really horrible on the ground. And Azerbaijan really changed the status quo, currently reached half of the southern territory, apparently to the Armenian border, so targeting the Lachin corridor may be possible. And the situation in Europe and USA is not very good, so even the foreign, let's say, interventions are not very visible, because European Union is having strong problem with the COVID-19 situation, with the pandemic, and with the economic difficulties and struggles that it's causing. In the United States, you're having shortly before the presidential elections. And even in Russia, Russia is having a lot of internal problems currently. Also, they have to solve the situation in Belarus on the ground. So even the Russians are not very active in this situation. And the worst scenario, that Nagorno-Karabakh Ministry of Defense threatened to attack gas and oil infrastructure of Azerbaijan. If this happens, that would be really the nightmare of the conflict. So both sides are accusing each other from the violation of humanitarian law, violation of human rights. And there is a big fog because there are no peacekeepers on the ground, so you have no chance to prove which side is having rights in this issue. And the last slide, what could be done? Need for strong international pressure to sign the ceasefire that would be respected by both sides. But there is a problem currently how to persuade Azerbaijan that it's having some meaning to return back to the table when all the previous rounds of discussions had been fruitless. So in this issue, you're having 30 years of no progress. So this is very difficult to persuade. Employ peacekeeping forces as soon as possible, but the question is where to find at least 1,000 men for peacekeeping forces, because the line is 300 kilometers long. So some strategists are saying that it should be more than 1,000 men, in the ideal case 4,000 men. OSCE is having no experience with the peacekeeping operations, nor it has budget for it. So it should be delegated to United Nations Security Council resolution, but there is a very difficult diplomatic view. Then military gains should be delegitimized in the bargaining process, but it's a policy of double standards, because in 1994 the military gains mattered. So once again, this is problematic. Armenia is discussing a bill that it should recognize Nagorno-Karabakh as an independent state. I think that they should not do this step, because this move would ruin completely the mandate to negotiate the Minsk process. Another thing should be the supporting of track to diplomacy. It means contact, day-to-day contact between people, between teachers, between doctors. This is the role of the track to diplomacy, but currently it is in the lowest level since 1988, because they are almost not meeting each other, only on few fora, and still you can hear the same old stories that, okay, it should be good to have some contacts, but in reality, this is not occurring. And even the former civil society activists on both sides are currently very nationalistic in their mood. So I'm very skeptic about the role of track to diplomacy currently. There should be pressure on independent examination of violation of human rights, but this is not realistic at all, because both sides are currently violating the human rights. So it's not realistic. So the last part, it's very sad, but hopefully a lot of snow will soon appear. Then it will stop the war, and the war can go to trench position that will allow some negotiations in the process. Thank you for the presentation. I wanted to tell you this issue from my personal point of view, and now I'm open for discussion, and the floor is yours. if I know, I would be keen to answer.
Okay, thank you, Tomáš, very much for a fascinating discussion about such a complex issue. We're going to have the Q&A, and please write your questions. You have the Q&A button, and write your questions there. And I'm going to read aloud to Tomáš, and he's going to answer. But before, I'm going to use my advantage as moderator to ask a question. A friend of mine, G. Alexander Crowder from the University of Miami, sent me a question that regards Nakhchivan. So his question is, why are the Armenians not threatening the Azerbaijan enclave of Nakhchivan?
Nakhichevan. Yeah, because Nakhichevan is enclave. It is not connected directly to Azerbaijan. So from the Armenian perspective, it is right now defensive war, and it is to defend the line of contact, especially on the south, because the south of the Karabakh is the most vulnerable part, because it is the lowland. The upper part, in the north border, there is the Mrav Mountains, and it is over 2,000 meters high. Some of the territories are 3,000 meters high, so this is not the problematic part. And in Nakhichevan, no Armenians are living. They don't have vital interests there, so it would be only hitting the civilian targets. Here it is close to the line of contact, and still the Armenian side is denying that they are bombing the civilian targets. They are saying that they bombed only the airport from which, the military airport from which the drones started, but they are denying civilian targets. So they are not attacking Nakhichevan. So that's my answer.
Okay, thank you. We have like many questions already, and let me start then asking three questions together that I think one you partially answered already. That is, so first, what reasons can force Azerbaijan to return to negotiations? Then second, what are Russia's main interests in the situation, and what would be Russia's preferred scenario in the future, or the development of the situation? And how is it possible to reconcile the principles of sovereignty and the right of peoples to self-determination in the case of Nagorno Karabakh?
I would start with the question about the Russian role. This is possible to answer this. Then the two other questions, thank you for them. It's very wise and clever questions, and I'm afraid that better questions than answers I can offer. In Russia, I think that the long-term Russian interest is to make their strategic goal to be stronger on the southern Caucasus. So Russia want to have peacekeepers, and it offered to give peacekeepers many times, but both sides, Armenia and Azerbaijan, are refusing this Russian interest. Sometimes I'm reading that Russia wants status quo, because as long as there is status quo, it can give weapons to both sides, to Armenia and to Azerbaijan, not give, sell, of course, to sell weapons to both sides. But I would say it is different than the other conflicts on the South Caucasus, where Russia is a part of the conflict. Here in Nagorno Karabakh, it is not a directly involved side in the conflict. And I think that currently it is Russian nightmare, the situation in Nagorno Karabakh, because they are binded to offer help to Armenia in the case that Azerbaijanis attack Armenian land. I don't mean Nagorno Karabakh, because in CSTO there are no words about supporting the defense in Nagorno Karabakh Republic, but supporting the Armenia. So if this occurs, Russians are obliged to help to Armenians, but Azerbaijan is very strongly connected to Turkey, and this can cause some proxy war between Russia and Turkey, as it occurred in Syria, for example. So Russia is not very happy about the situation. And last but not least, still you can read that Russia is supporting Armenia, but I would say that Russia is selling weapons to both sides and trying to have as good contacts as possible with Azerbaijan. So if they have to choose the side, this is nightmare. And another thing is the relationship between Putin and Pashinyan, that Nikol Pashinyan is not the favorable politician for the Russian government or Vladimir Putin. So the Russian side is very multivectoral, and it's having a lot of layers and levels. Then the second question was about the peace plan, how to return back to some peace solution and how to persuade the parties it's having some meaning to return back to negotiations. The problem is that currently it is a zero-sum game. You win or you lose. There is nothing in between. In academic perspective, always when there should be some progress, the population should be ready for some peace accords, for some peace initiatives, and for some compromises. Currently, there is no place for any compromises in Armenia and Azerbaijan because it's still a zero-sum game. You win or you lose. So right now, I am very skeptic about the idea to return back to the fruitful negotiations. We can return back to some form of negotiations, but about the possible solution and fruitfulness of this discussion, it is right now beyond my scope to say something positive.
Okay, but then like another question, how can United Nations resolutions on Karabakh be implemented now if 30 years of negotiations lead to no result?
It's once again very, very good question. I would say that even the negotiations are better than nothing. I can give you examples, for example, from Abkhazia. They used to be in the similar situation before 2008. It led to nowhere. But because the civil society were meeting, they made small steps-to-step projects, like what I have said, between primary schools, when they had exhibitions of paintings. Then it used to be small environmental projects, and it is about mutual trust, building up the trust to show that the other people are not just the enemy. And I think that if you return back to the negotiations and if you start to support this project, there is a possibility from the bottom up to solve the situation. And it's a long-time process. It is not the conflict resolution, it is conflict transformation, transforming the conflict step to step. It's for 20, 30, 40 years. No other chance, because you have to change the heart and mind of the people to understand that it's having the meaning, some sort of cooperation. Otherwise, it will be only on the military ground. And on the military ground, it's really leading nowhere, this situation. So my point is that the goal is to have negotiations, at least to speak, because then in the case of Abkhazia, what you have seen when the war in South Ossetia started, the people from civil society had numbers, phone numbers, and and Georgians and Abkhazians could inform the other what is going on in their republic, and had some leverages on the politicians about this dialogue. So I think that's the only possibility, but you cannot expect that if the side returned back to the negotiations that it would be a miracle, and during the next 1 or 2 years we will have a peace process that both sides would be able to sign.
Okay, another question is, one of the CSSR researchers, Eva Berzinga, thank you very much for the very informative presentation. Does the fact that Armenia has experienced successful democratization processes in the last years play some role in the current conflict in parallel with ethnic issues? And I will add a second question, that why Pashinyan choose different politics than previous leaders?
Thank you for this question. I would start with the first part, that usually in the academic literature, what you can see, it's a Lederach peace-building pyramid. Lederach peace-building pyramid is saying that you are having two conflict society, A and B, and there must be a connection between the society. So I mean, the first between political leaders should meet each other and to have the official peace process. Then you should have also the track to diplomacy. The people from the civil society organizations should speak with the other on the other side. This is called the horizontal peace building, which is very important, this peace building. But then is another thing, and this is called vertical peace building. And vertical peace building means that you must have open up democratic channels inside of the society. So democratization is very important, because then you can have peace process from the bottom up, and then the civil society can influence the politicians in their goals. And then the leaders are talking with the civil society activists. So you're having these two vectors, horizontal peace building and vertical peace building. And the second side, why Nikol Pashinyan chose different tactic. First, I have mentioned that Nikol Pashinyan is not from Nagorno Karabakh. So for the first time, you are having a leader who was not, after a long time, after 20 years, who was not born in Nagorno Karabakh. And it was very visible on the beginning in 2018. In 2018, when he came to power, they used to be very horrified in Nagorno Karabakh that Nikol Pashinyan came to power. And they have been thinking how to cohabitate with them, because one thing that I didn't mention are the relations between Nagorno Karabakh Republic and Armenia. It is not as harmonious as one would assume. The politicians must be very loyal to Armenia, and they must be very sensitive what is going on in Armenia. So if in Armenia you are having politician which came from the civil society and from the bottom up, then you must have the same vectors in Nagorno-Karabakh Republic. So you can see that there used to be frictions, and people had huge fears about Nikol Pashinyan in power. And so that's first thing. And second thing, I would say that Nikol Pashinyan is doing very populistic politics currently, because his mandate is popular support. So if you are having a huge nationalism currently in Armenia, and the people are supporting Pashinyan's move, so he's playing this nationalist card. So that's my explanation. Many old diplomats are strongly against his politician. I have read very nice statement of Gerard Libaridian. He was he was cooperating with Robert Kocharian at the end of the 90s. And he said that this is preparing Armenia for permanent war, and this is not very wise tactic, because now not only Azerbaijan is the enemy, but also Turkey is the enemy, and this is the road to the hell. He wrote it on the beginning of September, I think 2nd or 3rd. It's you can find it on Armenia's news outlets, his open speech about this one. So that's my answer.
Okay, next question, also from CSSR researcher Ilse Vilka. There are certain economic costs for both sides to continue the military conflict. Do you know what is the awareness about this cost in general, Armenian and Azerbaijani societies? I mean, like the cost for the economic cost for both societies.
There are huge costs of the war. I would start with that Armenia and Azerbaijan are one of the most militarized society in the world. In the BMI index, I think that Armenia is on the 2nd place behind Israel, and Azerbaijan, I think, is 3rd or 4th. So both of these countries are in the first 5 most militarized societies in the world, which of course is causing that the expenditures to army expenditures are very high, and you don't have money that you could invest into other sectors. That's the first cost of the war. And then the second cost is the possibility of cooperation, because, for example, for Armenia, it is very difficult to have good cooperation with the West and to show their vision that they are really democratic society, Western oriented, when they are having conflict and they are having so nationalistic propaganda in their own country. So that is another effects of foreign direct investments and so on. And of course, the material and human losses, that's even worse, because, as I have said, up to now, roughly 1,500 people died, and you cannot express in numbers these losses. And of course, not only the losses of people, but for the future generation, this enemy image. You can see, for example, how the situation is changing in Transnistria currently, that there is a possibility of talking. People from Transnistria are coming to Chisinau to the universities. They can study. In Nagorno Karabakh, this is not working. So for the future generation, that's only about atrocities and about close mind in the nationalist sentiment.
Okay, another question is, you mentioned Syrian mercenaries. And so there is a question here challenging this, saying that, so from which side are they fighting? If they are not from Azerbaijan, 4 weeks passed from the start of the war, not a single photo of Syrian fighters, not any evidence. And then Mr. Zayev is saying that this is fake news from the Armenian side. Could you please comment?
So both sides are accusing each other of the Syrian mercenaries. In Azerbaijan, you can read that the fighters from Syria are fighting on the Armenian side. The Armenians are blaming Azerbaijan that they are mercenaries from Syria, around 1,000 of them. That's, of course, both sides are accusing each other, but it used to be the investigation of Chatham House, and Chatham House said that on the ground they are militias from Syria, so on the Azerbaijani side. So that's Chatham House. Chatham House source. Of course, Laurence Brers approved this as well. So in the international academia, I would say two people are having the biggest insight, and that's Tom DeVal and Laurence Brers. Both of them, you cannot accuse that they would be biased. So I would assume as a good point for all listeners to look, for example, on their Twitter, because they are trying to work with the sources that are proved. Laurence Brers and Tom DeVal. That's my answer.
Okay, for my colleague, Tons Rostoks, what do you think about Azerbaijan's perspective on this conflict? Is the present military offensive aimed at reinvigorating the diplomatic process, or are they exploring the viability of a pure military solution to this conflict? In other words, the return of their territories by force.
It's very, very difficult question, this one. I don't have proper answer on that. It can be both things. First thing is to gain some advantage when you return back to the negotiations. Then you are having some leverage, the card that you can play. Or the second one, it can be the real tiredness of the peace process leading to nowhere. And because of the political support, the public support for the military means, maybe that's another option, that it's the military tactic, because nothing else was working during the past 30 years. So the military solution can be another viable option for Ilham Aliyev. So both answers can be right.
Okay, there are two questions about resources. So right now, is there any issue regarding resources like that can be extracted from that region, like minerals or oil, wherever?
No, it is not about the resources. As I have said, sometimes you can read it that the journalists on the West are writing about Karabakh as about black garden because it has fertile soil. It doesn't have the so fertile soil. So the place for agriculture, it's pointless. Then you can use woods, but wood is not something that you can sell for huge amounts of money, and there is no extraction of mineral resources, so they cannot use anything. So I would say it is a conflict of values, so it is a symbolic meaning. And then for the Armenians, it is surviving tactic. I described it in the presentation that there is an enemy and they must be united, otherwise next massacres will come. So it is a defensive strategy right now for the Armenians. So you really cannot use the natural resources.
Okay. Right, but then if you cannot use natural resources, and then this is a question from Mr. Jan Steiskal. The current economic links of Nagorno Karabakh, do they have any meaning to the conflict? Like, is there a clearly dominant connection with economy of either one or the other country? And then I think a very important question here is, in what extent, supposing that Nagorno-Karabakh would become independent, for example, what is the level of self-sustainability of its economy?
Mm-hmm. So the independence, if Nagorno Karabakh can be independent, and what is the level of support for the independence? On the beginning of the conflict, when it started at the end of the 80s, you can see the slogans "Miatsum," unity. So the first idea was about the unification of Nagorno Karabakh with Armenia. The Karabakh Committee said the same on the beginning. Later on, when the war ended up, it was about the independence of Nagorno Karabakh, proclamation of independence. But I would say, according my research that I have made when I was asking with many people from Nagorno Karabakh, the society is divided inside of the Nagorno Karabakh in the question whether they want unification with Armenia or whether they want independence. And politicians are not opening and playing this card because they understand that this is very sensitive and Azerbaijan is the enemy. They don't want to polarize the society in this question. It was a very nice policy paper who wrote Hrant Mikaelian in 2017, Hrant Mikaelian, and he wrote that it is roughly 50-50. The people who would like to be independent and the people who would like to join Armenia. And politicians in Nagorno-Karabakh are not openly supporting any option. So it is taboo in the society because they don't want to polarize the society. And if Nagorno-Karabakh is having viability to be independent state, you are having a lot of small states that could be viable. For Nagorno-Karabakh, the population is very tiny. And even after this situation, when half of the population are refugees, it's a very tiny country. But very vital for them is the cooperation with Armenia. And even currently, they are having huge budget support from the Armenian side. So their economy is based on direct budget support from the Armenian side. And because all of the people in Nagorno-Karabakh are Armenians, so that's this cooperation. So this is the viability for Nagorno-Karabakh, but nobody would recognize Nagorno-Karabakh. You can see that every time when the war starts or the skirmishes starts, the Armenia is playing this game and is saying that it will recognize Nagorno-Karabakh. But currently there is not a huge will in the European Union or in the United States, though they are having huge Armenian diaspora, to recognize the independence of Karabakh. But I may be wrong in this issue. You never know. But that's my answer about the independence.
Okay, we're running out of time, but anyway, I'd like to ask a last question. And before doing that, I would like to remember everybody that next Monday, the 26th of October at 4 o'clock Latvia's time, we will have a webinar discussing the unrest in Belarus with Professor Grigory Yov, and of course, you're all invited. This discussion will be also on our YouTube channel. And before giving the last question, I would like to about the Syrian mercenaries that Sabuhi Rizayev very emotionally and using expletives. Let's put it this way, like. He's protesting that it's not true, but okay. So, but there is a question about the UN resolutions about the conflict that you didn't mention then. Could you please comment? And for the audience, the questions we didn't ask here because of time. I'm going to pass Thomas and with your email, and then if he has the disposition and time, he might answer you privately by email.
Thank you, Anis. The UN resolution, they are calling for the UN resolution. Currently, you can see them, especially yesterday after the meeting. The problem with the UN resolution is, in this case, you need mandate 7. Mandate 6, the monitoring mission is senseless, pointless. So currently you must have mandate 7, and mandate 7 is politically very, very sensitive because all members must agree and support this idea. And on the ground, still with the deployment of the peacekeeping forces, you didn't have the agreement from the Azerbaijani and Armenian side during the past 20 or 25 years. So I say that this is very politically sensitive and not sure if this can happen. But there is a need for this one, and deployment of peacekeepers, from my point of view, is necessary.
Okay, we run out of time. I would like to thank Tomáš for a great and very interesting presentation that enlightened us. I learned a lot. Thank you very much. I think that everybody learned a lot. And so now, unfortunately, it's time to say goodbye. Thank you very much.
Yanis, thank you for inviting me, and thank you that I had an opportunity to share my experience with you and with the audience.
Okay, so thank you all. Goodbye and all the best.
Yeah, you too as well. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.